Okay, should I begin? Fine. Okay, welcome to this session about ClojureScript and more specific, like how to develop React components using a style or a syntax called Hiccup. My name is David, and I have coded Clojure and ClojureScript for about 1 year. I joined a team that develops web apps and services using this platform. Thanks. And before that, I have coded a lot of JavaScript, Node.js, Python, and also I've been very much in the C# and .NET world, so coding like ASP.NET and Episerver and things like that. But I've coded Clojure and ClojureScript for a year, and what I want to do tonight is to share what I have learned basically during my first year as a Clojure software developer. Yeah. And I want to begin with just a quick, not an intro, but I want to highlight some things about the Clojure language itself, and things that we use a lot when we write ClojureScript apps. And one thing is that we use vectors. And a vector it's an array, and in Clojure it's called vector. And each item is separated. We don't use commas and things like that. It's separated with space. Another thing that we use frequently is maps. So it's something that you store keys and values. So it's sort of similar to what you have in JavaScript, like object literals or even JSON, or dictionaries in Python. We also have something called keywords, that we use a lot in Clojure and ClojureScript. And keywords are used, for instance, if you look at the map, you see that I have used something called keyword for the key position of it. So we can use strings, but keywords has some additional functionality that is really nice to use in Clojure. And of course, we have functions. And since Clojure is a part of the Lisp family, so basically what we do is we write lists. We wrap everything in parentheses. Okay, so vectors, keywords, and maps. This is something that we use if you want to develop a web app using Clojure entirely. So what you can do is to write the HTML markup using Clojure data structures. And what you see here is basically will be rendered as a HTML div tag. So an element is written using the Clojure vector, and the element type is defined by using a keyword. And it's this style of writing HTML markup that is called Hiccup, or syntax. So here's another example. Here's a link or an anchor tag. And what I've used here is, links often need an URL or additional attributes. And attributes are defined using Clojure maps. So we have a keyword defining what the attribute name is, and the value is the value of the attribute. So I can have one or more attributes appended to my element. So if I would like to put this link within a div tag, so this is how I could do it. I sort of nest the vectors, or nest the arrays. And if I would write the same code in React JSX or plain HTML, I would probably do something like this. So this is the equivalent of how you would do it in a pure HTML. Okay. If I put this div tag within a function, well, then I have actually created a React component or a component. So placing Hiccup markup in a function will create a React component. And in this example, I have an input parameter that kind of so you can reuse the URL. Great. So ClojureScript is really what we do when we write web apps in ClojureScript. Is we use the Clojure language, and we have something that compiles it to JavaScript, and then you can run it in a browser. So essentially, ClojureScript is a compiler. So you write your things in Clojure, compile it, and the output is JavaScript. So, and you don't actually press some compile or build button. The compilation occurs all the time as you type. But ClojureScript only cares about JavaScript. So if we want to build something based on React, we need some help. We need to help the compiler a bit. So I'm going to add a library called Reagent. And Reagent is a sort of a tool or a library that kind of wraps React. So it makes it possible to write your React components using Clojure, and it will be compiled to JavaScript that can run in a browser. Okay. So this is the part I'm a bit extra nervous about, because I'm going to try to live code some parts. Okay, so I have my Hello World example site running here. Let me double check that it's so it seems to work. So what do we have here? I have prepared with some example code. And what we see here, to the right, at this side, you see my editor. And over here, you have a web browser. Okay. And what you see here is some code, so some functions that actually are React components. So if I go from the top here, I have something called theme toggle field. I'll come back to what it actually does in a moment, but it returns an input field, or more like it returns a checkbox. So, and it has some CSS classes to it and things like that. And I have another component that renders out or returns a HTML label. And it sort of is connected to this checkbox because it's using the same ID. Okay. Over here, I have some sort of a container component, like kind of wrapping or adding sub-components to it. So I'm adding this theme toggle field. I have a div tag, and I'm adding this other component over here. These two functions are a little bit different, because this one is actually a sort of a helper function. I'll come back to this just in a moment. Over here is the entry point for my web page. This is where everything starts. So I'm using this Reagent library, and I'm telling it to render something. I'm telling it to render my container component. So if I could actually ask it to render just a div, and the output will be different, like this. And the second argument here is that I want to tell Reagent where to actually put my components. So if we have a look at this function called main element, so this is where I'm starting to use some sort of JavaScript interop, because I work in a Clojure environment, but I have full access to the JavaScript APIs to access browser things. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the global document object and calling this getElementById function with an ID. So, and what I can do, I can actually try to run it in my editor. It looks like it actually returns something. So if I would by accident misspell the ID, then I would get something wrong with it. Let's do something like this. And I can also inspect what kind of element is this. So I can actually continue to try to extract the wrong key combination. Extract the ID of that element. So it seems that I have the right element. What about the tag name? Oh, it's called main something. So by doing this, I can try to experiment to understand what is returned from this function. And so where is this element named ID? Well, I have added in my example site an HTML template. This one will be used in combination with my Clojure code. So, and if we have a look at it, I have added some fancy fonts and a couple of CSS files. So I can use like CSS and whatever I'm used to. I don't have to relearn how to use CSS and things like that. So I can use what I already know. And here is this root element where I want to put all my React components. And as we evaluated, it was an element called main. And I have two script tags too, and this row 13 is actually the code that is compiled, my Clojure code that is compiled to JavaScript. And on this row, this is actually where I kind of trigger my main function in my Clojure app. If I go back to this app, CLJS. So what makes this possible is that I have this funny looking character here. It's some sort of metadata to my function. And I'm telling the ClojureScript compiler to treat this function as an entry point. Because when we package this and send it to a production or to the internet, all JavaScript will be packed and minified, and all the function names will have very shortened names, except for this one, because this will always be called main, because I've asked the compiler to keep it like that. Okay. So let's go back to this page component. So I have added a div tag and put some a component within it. You can see that here I've added an attribute. And since I only have one attribute, and I think it's a little bit verbose to have this style, I can shorten this a bit and skip this this map. So this is also a way I can write my element and attaching a div tag to it. I think I can do the same thing with this input, this checkbox. I can append the class name directly here. Something like this, and then I can get rid of this row here. Oh, sorry. Let's do something like that. So this is the same idea, but personally I think this is a little bit more readable. So I'm going to use the same idea for the label on my other component. Something like this. And I think by doing that, my kind of component will become a one-liner instead, and I like those things. So this is the sort of the same, but a little bit shorter. Okay. This is fine and all, but you know, my page is blank. I would like to have some sort of something to read or some text or something. So what I want to do is I want to add a component that kind of outputs some sort of greeting text or something. So I'm going to start by creating a function that will become a component. And that one, I think I'm going to use like a header. Something like this. Oh, I have done something terribly wrong. There. Good. But nobody is using my component here, so I'm going to put it just after that toggle label, like this. Nice. So I have my web page that tells everyone good evening, and but it's still kind of boring. So perhaps you have noticed this little funny looking icon here. I think it's a sun. So I'm going to try to like press that one. So it looks like it's some sort of like a desktop or theme switcher. So I want to kind of do something cool with that. So the way this works is it's because of these two components, the input checkbox and the label, in combination with my CSS files. Oh, didn't I open it? I'm going to just... this is the one. So I actually found this on the internet, on this blog. So thank you, Alexander, for this. I was looking for a way to make a switch, like dark theme, light theme switch that is pure CSS without any code, JavaScript and things like that. So I found this one. Okay. But this is kind of disconnected to... I have no control. I don't know which theme is selected. So I'm going to try to keep track on what I have selected, which theme is currently the active one. And I'm going to do that by introducing another library that is very commonly used together with Reagent. And that is a library called reframe. And reframe helps you keep track of state, basically. Because Reagent is about rendering like HTML and creating components that you can reuse. And so far my components they don't care about any state or anything like that. So reframe will create like an in-memory database for you. So it's like a data that is centralized that code can interact with. And the way reframe works is that you send events to it. You want something to change, and you can also subscribe to changes in a database. So I'm going to include another code, a code that I have prepared with too. Hello.events. We can have a look at that one too. So this is how you can define an event using this library called reframe. And what I was looking for is this event with this name, toggle theme. So what happens when you kind of trigger the event, it will store the active theme. And it actually will have it basically what is behind the scenes. It's just a checkbox. So we will see if the checkbox is checked or unchecked. So that way we can decide if it's a light theme or dark theme. So let's go back to the app here. And I'm thinking about adding some functionality to our checkbox, something like this. On change. And what I want to do is to trigger a function. I will name it toggle change. Toggle theme, sorry. So let's add it over here. So and this function will get the HTML an HTML event. So it's an object called event. And what I want to do with that one is to extract the now I remember. I want to trigger my reframe event, which is called dispatch in reframe. And I want to trigger that toggle theme. And I want to pass in if the checkbox is checked or if it's unchecked. And I'm going to navigate through my event object. So, and in JavaScript, you browse you navigate to the target, which is the actual element, and if it's checked or not. Something like this. Let's try it out. So every time I click this, an event is triggered. But I have no idea if it works or if it doesn't work. So how can I find this out? I have made some preparations over here. We'll uncomment some code here. So what I can do is I can actually browse the state of my current database from my editor. So it looks like the active theme is dark. So if I kind of switch it to light theme and run this function again, the active theme is light. If I switch back, it's dark. So something seems to happen when I press that icon over here. Good. So this is fine. I have something that keeps track of the current theme that is active. Now I would like something to happen when something else to happen besides the switching theme. I would like to change this greeting to something else. And this can be done by listening to or subscribing to changes of that reframe database. So I'm going to include another, not a library, but another namespace that I have written. Let's have a look at this one too. There it is. And this is how you can define subscriptions in reframe. So what I'm looking for is this one. So I have a subscription named light theme ? And in Clojure, question marks is a convention for Booleans. So this will return true or false. And what this does behind the scenes, it kind of looks in my state database and looks for a path in that database. In this case, it's theme and active and the value of that node. So I want to use this light theme subscription. So I'm going to go back to my app here. And what I'm thinking about is doing something like this. So if it is light theme, I want to write something different than good evening. So perhaps good morning. Otherwise, I want to print out good evening. And since I've changed my interface to my function here, I have to go to this greeting where I kind of use this function. So what I want to do here is to subscribe to this. I want to subscribe to this light theme subscription. Let's try it out. Whoa, it works. Whew. So what happens here is that I'm passing this result of this subscription to my greeting function, and the greeting function does an if and else and displays different things based on that. And if you remember, I went down to my secret code over here to like print out the state of the database. But I can also evaluate the state of my current subscription. So the light theme returned false, which seems to be correct. So if I change the theme to be a light theme, it's true. So I can very quickly evaluate. Oops, I did something wrong here. How my database looks and what will be the output of these subscriptions. So what's kind of I don't really like is this weird syntax, the @ sign and things like that. So I'm thinking about I can make this a bit shorter. So I have added a shorthand for it, which is very common if you use reframe. So instead of having this @ sign, I will kind of try to shorten this out a bit. So let's give it a try. So it seems to work fine. Nice. Okay, so what is going on here really? What happens? You've seen me like change some text and the page reloads and evaluating code and things like that. So what happens here? If I go back to like changing some text or something in my page like that, I'm going to add a dot and hit save. Do you see that? Did you see the little icon at the bottom there? So that's my web server kind of refreshing the page. So this is hot reloading. So it's quite common in JavaScript and other languages too. So we have that. And what happens when I kind of press the buttons here? I can actually go here, and I'm going to add a comment section, which is a way to have a safe environment for experimenting with live code. So what I can do, I can actually force executing this my events too. So I've told my database that it's light theme, so my text changed to good morning. Now I have returned back. So what happens here is when I change my database, so it's not my code that is reloading, but in this case it's React that notices that my component has changed, so the parameters to that one has changed, so it will re-render this specific component. It's like, the virtual DOM and things like that. So that is in the React world. I'm just triggering an event and changing something that has to do with that component. And finally, the thing I've done, you saw me kind of evaluating the DOM and things like that, or even evaluating the events, or having a look at the database like this. I'm having this secret key combination. So this is my editor that is online with my web page, basically, or with a browser. So I have a REPL that kind of runs, and it's connected to what happens in the browser. So it's a communication between the browser and the REPL, which is a server, actually, that kind of does this magic. And what I can do, I can also, if I open the inspector in my browser, I can do things like this. And run this. So I don't know if you see it, but it kind of printed out hello world. So I'm like connected to my browser. So it's back and forth. So I can browse the data, the in-memory data. I can trigger events, and I can like manipulate even the DOM if I would like to do that. And I think this combination of hot reloading, virtual DOM from the React world, and this interactive REPL, I would call this interactive web development. Interactive web development. And I think it's very powerful because you have sort of control and flow over during your development. Okay. And I think this is what I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I will sneak by you here.
Yes.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Very interesting and very brave that you did live coding. Yes, we had two guys before actually live coding. One was a Haskell guy, and the second one was a Clojure guy, actually live coding.
James.
So, yes, James, he had his live coding, and he also seemed pretty confident to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Have you done any functional programming prior to Clojure?
I don't know if it counts, but I've coded a lot of JavaScript and try to code it functional. And even when I was mainly coding C#, kind of had a functional mindset, even though it's very much object orientation there in C#. So
okay.
So, but this is the first language that is like pure functional and immutable and cool things like that.
Was it easy or hard to learn?
It was for me. It was very difficult. I was like, I have a blog post called "The 12 Stages of Learning Clojure." I can post it later. That kind of explains my journey during this year. So it was difficult, the syntax to actually understand, but when every pieces come together, you actually find out the power of the powerful language that you actually use. So it has been a journey, but also very fun to learn.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Big applause.